There were other times where I was like, oh my gosh, there's this whole world outside of education that I was not familiar with. But the skill set transfers so beautifully from everything I was doing in education to managing and running your own business. So it's been pretty amazing. In your classroom, you have to put in systems and structures to make sure that everyone knows the expectations, that you can all thrive and reach these same end of year goals. And it's the same way running a business, right? I have to put in systems and structures to make sure everything is running smoothly. You have to be the captain of the ship, and you have to make decisions, several decisions very quickly all throughout the day, which is the same as being in the classroom. But most of all is the connection that our team members make with these clients that has them coming back and making sure that, we're a pillar in the community for every child feeling important and loved. And that was the same philosophy I had when I was a teacher. And I feel most teachers have as well. Like, I don't know if I would have been brave or courageous enough to start a business on my own, but because there was this kind of safeguard of like, oh, there's the recipe, there's these things you can follow.
Welcome back to the Hustle and Grind podcast, the show where we dig into why real entrepreneurs trade comfort for conviction. This isn't about vanity metrics or overnight success. It's about the stories behind building a reputation that actually matters. I'm your host, Andrew, keynote architect, platform builder, and fellow founder in the trenches. Today, I'm sitting down with Deean Ferrone, the highly successful multi-unit franchisee and owner-operator of 3 Pigtails and Crew Cuts children's hair salons across the Denver metro area. Deean has a truly inspiring founder story. For 13 years, she was a dedicated educator, a teacher, instructional coach, and district-level facilitator across 3 states. But in 2022, she channeled her passion for children, community, and leadership into a new chapter: small business ownership. Since then, she's led absolutely remarkable growth. She's doubled sales at one location, earned the top sales award for her Westminster salon 3 years in a row, and took home the prestigious President's Award for Excellence. Deean is known today for creating fun, welcoming spaces for family, building strong, motivated teams, and proving that blending heart, quality service, and consistent excellence is the real recipe for a thriving, community-centered business. So, Deean, thank you so much for being on the show today. Really appreciate it. We have really similar backgrounds, and so I'm looking to explore kind of how you got into what you're doing now, because it's been a pretty diverse list of industries you've been in. Really looking forward to hearing the stories behind that. So first of all, thank you so much for being on the show today. I appreciate you.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me, Andrew.
Mm-hmm. So we heard your intro, but how did you go from the learning industry in Florida to owning a top-performing franchise in Denver? That's not usually the way. Usually go from Denver to Florida, cold to warm. What was the series of events that brought you to that point? Let's go through the story first.
Yeah, it's been quite a journey. So I graduated with a master's in elementary ed at the University of Central Florida in 2008, right when the great financial crisis was happening. So there was not a job to be had in the state of Florida, but a friend of mine lived out in Boulder. And so I packed in my car, drove cross country New Year's Day. And within that first year of living in Colorado, started my education journey as a reading interventionist. I did that for several years for Denver Public Schools. And then my husband's position took us to San Francisco. And so I worked for the assistant superintendent out there and worked with a collaborative of dual language immersion schools as a data analyst and a literacy coach, and just did a lot of different hats in the education world. And then moved into the Bay Area, where I taught elementary grades for several years. And then once we had kids, we decided we wanted to go back to Colorado. And so I worked here for a couple of years in education, teaching kindergarten and 4th grade. And during the last couple of years, so 2020, COVID hit. Right. And I was like, you know what? It's been 13 years. Maybe it's time to shift gears a little bit. Our kids were still very little, and we took them for a haircut at a competitor just a little north of us. And we saw a huge sign on the wall that said franchise opportunities available. And my husband has always been like a entrepreneur kind of side hustle kind of person. And we had reached out to Yogurtland years years and years before, just kind of curious about franchises in general. And so we called this competitor and they didn't call us back. And then we emailed them and they said, well, so glad you had a great time in Utah. And we were telling this same story to our neighbor who also had small kids. And he said, oh, well, don't you know about pigtails and crew cuts? And we're like, no, what's pigtails and crew cuts? Like, oh, it's another children's hair salon. And so we called them. They called us back in 15 minutes, and they just had all their ducks in a row. And so we decided, you know what, maybe we look at building one out. And we were in the process of discussing it with them, and they said, well, actually, there's an existing location right there by you in Westminster, Colorado, that's for sale. Would you be interested in acquiring instead of building out from scratch? And so we said, yeah, okay, maybe. So we went out to dinner with the owner. And then a couple months later, after, the negotiation process, we purchased that salon. And then we had owned it for probably 4 months when the owner of the Denver and Parker locations said, hey, we're getting a divorce. We need to sell quickly, unfortunately. And so we were like, well, I guess we can go from 1 to 3 locations in 6 months. Why not?
Let's do it.
And so we jumped on that. And now, I'm the owner operator of 3 locations of Pigtails and Crew Cuts. And there's about 85 locations nationwide.
Because I had never heard of the chain until I had come across you, and because it seems like it's more kind of, you said 85 different 85 places throughout the U.S. and not big, but that's a really interesting growth. Like three, what was that again? So 3 locations within how long?
About 6 months.
That's growth, and at least you had like some sort of a basis to, you weren't building them all out from scratch. You had something coming in. How was that transition?
Oh my gosh, it was crazy. They say being an entrepreneur is very similar to just being on a roller coaster where you're just like up and down and twisting and turning all the time. And I would 100% agree. There were some times where I cried myself to sleep at night. And there were other times where I was like, oh my gosh, there's this whole world outside of education that I was not familiar with. But the skill set transfers so beautifully from everything I was doing in education to managing and running your own business. So it's been pretty amazing.
Talk about that a little bit, because there's a lot of people who are leaving education, going into usually instructional design or something in the corporate world or the higher ed world where they design this. There's a few of us, though, that, because this is where I started with the learning industry and then went into entrepreneurship and kind of built out from there. What are the skill sets that transfer well? We'll start with that for you.
Yeah, I actually tell all of my friends who are teachers who are maybe considering a different profession, hey, you should run your own business because it is such a similar skill set. So when you're a classroom teacher, for example, and obviously there's a lot of other roles within the education world, but when you're a classroom teacher, you have maybe 26, maybe 36 small human beings. I mean, I taught elementary, so they were small. That you're in charge of, right? And you need to make sure that every single one of them has their needs met. They all have a different way of learning. They all have, a different background. And when you're a small business owner and you have several employees, I currently have 30, it's very similar. You're trying to address every single person's individual needs. But at the same time, in your classroom, you have to put in systems and structures to make sure that everyone knows the expectations, that you can all thrive and reach these same end of year goals. And it's the same way running a business, right? I have to put in systems and structures to make sure everything is running smoothly. You have to be the captain of the ship, and you have to make several decisions very quickly all throughout the day, which is the same as being in a classroom. And your job is to uplift, in my opinion, at least, your job is to uplift your employees, right? To make sure that they feel empowered, that they feel autonomy within their job, and that you are helping them reach their own individual career goals. But at the same time, you also have this goal for yourself, for how you want your business to thrive. And it really is all that. And and even more so, the communication you have with parents when you're a teacher and the care and the love that you pour into it is very similar to running your own business, right? Every single client that walks through our door, they have their own background as to why they came to us for a children's haircut, right? They could have gone to many other different salons. There's a salon on every corner, or they could cut their kids' hair in their kitchen, right? So you're competing with everyone, but at the same time, they're coming in because it feels like more than a haircut. It's an experience. We have little cars they sit in, they get animal crackers and lollipops, they watch Disney movies, they have all of the different things that make it distractions that make it a pleasant experience. But most of all, it's the connection that our team members make with these clients that has them coming back and making sure that, we're a pillar in the community for every child feeling important and loved. And that was the same philosophy I had when I was a teacher. And I feel most teachers have as well.
Yeah, and that makes sense. I mean, if you were capable of dealing with 32 kindergartners, you can very much run a business. I mean, I think the skill sets are compatible.
Absolutely. And things are thrown at you all day long. And it's the same thing. You're like, okay, I need to analyze this profit and loss statement. Oh, and by the way, the hot water heater exploded and it's in the ceiling. So we're going to deal with that too. So it's a little bit of everything. But the thing that I like is the autonomy of, you get to plan your day, you get to dedicate, your schedule however it is that you want. And there was a lot of autonomy in your classroom, but you're very much, have to follow the school schedule. If school starts at 7:32, you're at that door ready to welcome them in at 7:32. Well, when you're an entrepreneur, you have a little bit more flexibility. And that's been really great for me personally and my own family.
So it sounds like you're the implementer and your husband's more the visionary, or you're just kind of 100% on this? Or
Yeah. So we started it together. He had an opportunity to leave his commercial insurance career kind of at the same time that I left teaching. And we both were like, you know what, let's do this together. He's really great at analyzing, the lease and making sure that we're getting a great deal and negotiating. But then once we got it up and running, it was not enough to mandate having two people work full time. And it was also like, well, I'm very used to running my own ship. And it was like, you know what? Maybe you just go back to insurance and I will run this. And it's actually been wonderful. He definitely was the idea person, and I didn't think that I really would have a career outside of teaching. My mom was a teacher for 49 years, and I just felt like I had found what I wanted to do with my life, and I still to this day love teaching, and I might go back at some point. But it's really just been such a great fit for my skill set and for many teacher skill sets and for just our personal life in general. But he went back to commercial insurance, and now I'm the full CEO, owner, operator, however you want to call it.
Exactly. I always think that's interesting of couples who have started businesses, and I've known a few who have started larger businesses as well. And it's always interesting the dynamic between how it works. I've seen some make it work. I've seen some where it's like, I got this. You never quite know where it is. So it's really interesting to kind of really see that. So just wanted to ask the question on it, kind of see where that stood, and kind of usually there's one that kind of has all of the great visions and great ideas and does all of this great stuff, and the other one's like, great, which two of those million ideas are we going to actually implement now?
Absolutely.
There's a difference between the two. So what would you say the biggest growth issue that you've had is? Like, what was the biggest stumbling block you had when first starting this, and how did you overcome it?
Yeah, great question. I think the first stumbling block we had was really dealing with this not quite post-COVID, but post-pandemic kind of world where during when the rest of the world shut down, all the beauty schools also shut down, which means we did not have a plethora of new young hairstylists entering the industry. And there were a lot of regulations on how many physical human beings you could have in a room. And when you have a hair salon that has, 9 chairs, but you can only have 3 people in the room at a time, and mom brings in dad and grandma for the first haircut, that's, plus your stylist, that's all you can do. So unfortunately, COVID really drove away a lot of seasoned hairstylists from the industry. They just decided it's time to try something completely different. So the first year that we bought early 2022. It was hiring. It was just so difficult. I would post an ad and no one would respond for 4 months. Not a single person would respond. So getting that in, and then just really feeling the confidence within my own managerial strategies to make sure that I'm making the right hiring decisions and not just hiring whoever applied. Because if someone comes in and they get a bad haircut, they're usually not going to come back, or they had a bad experience. But if they're like, hey, we're really understaffed, or you say, we're really understaffed right now, we only have the haircuts available on this day and this day, but the person you have available that day is phenomenal, they're going to keep coming back. And like that road to finding the right team members was quite a rocky one for us. Fortunately, now we're in a much better place with our staff. We have a phenomenal staff at all 3 of our locations, but the hiring piece and putting the right person in the right job was 100% the biggest roadblock.
And I think that's something, especially in a situation where you're just trying to keep things alive. You would just purchase this, and now you're trying to find staff for it. People get pulse syndrome, and hire anything with a pulse. And you're right, though, is that a lot of times people are going to come in for haircuts. These are not like a regular person going out and getting a haircut. And it's just more, hey, my kid's getting their first haircut, much bigger deal, and having a positive experience in that. They're not going to say anything if they get a negative experience. They're just not going to come back again. And so it's one of those, situations. So that makes 100% sense. As far as, so you're running a company. Most salons run as where the I want to say hair cutter. That's not the word. We're going to play a fun word, trying to figure out the word that's in my head, and it's not coming out right. But let's go with it. Stylist. That's the word. Yes. They're usually contingent workforce. They're usually 1099s. Is that how you guys operate? And I'm just kind of curious about what the difference would be between that and maybe like an appointment setter that you have who's a W-2. How do you work with both of those separately?
Yeah, great question. So all of our employees are W-2 employees. So a lot of different salons, they run a booth rental where a stylist will go and rent a space, but they're essentially running their own tiny business where they're themselves the only employee inside someone else's shell, and they rent that one spot. There's also a commission based where you get a certain percentage as the stylist of whatever haircut or services you provide. Our employees, very similar to a lot of other walk-in salons that you are on, most corners, we're all W-2 employees. So they are paid hourly, and then they are paid, tips on top of that. So I do, regular payroll every other week, and they're, some of them have booth rentals somewhere else on the side and serve adults, but in general, most employees, like if they work for me, that's usually all they work for.
Nice. And they tend to prefer the W-2, or they like, I'm just curious about this. Yeah.
It depends on the individual, but yes, I have found for the most part, because it's consistent, they're getting paid whether there's someone in their chair or not. And a lot of them, they have families, they've done the booth rental situation in the past. They're ready to just take it a little bit easier because they're more seasoned. They come in, they provide their services, and then they go home, and they don't have to worry about, did I make my rent for this month and things like that.
Cool. Yeah. So let's see. The next question I would ask, out of that scaling, because you scaled fast and you purchased an existing company, but it was fast. What are some other things you've learned from that? Like, what are the things, if you could go back and say, I would do this differently, what are some of the things that you would have done differently?
I feel like a lot of people looking into franchising in general, they think that building out is the only way. Right? There's not a location in my area, or there is one location, but I want to look at, the next town over, and they feel like building out is the only option. We kind of felt that as well until we were presented with this opportunity to acquire a new one, or an existing one. I feel like the one we acquired first, the Westminster location, was number 1, 2, or 3 in the network consistently for many, many years, and is still now, I'm very proud to say, still number 1 in the network. And it ran very, very well. There was a great manager in place. Obviously, we've made some systematic changes, in the course of the 4 years that we've owned. But in general, there were a lot of things that were already working. And the salon had been there since 2010. So it had a real name in the community. It's a great location. It's a part of an outdoor mall that's very well taken care of. So when we walked in, there were a lot of great examples of how to run the business. So we got firsthand a lot of information on, okay, well, this is how you could do this, and this is how you could do this. And then when we acquired the other 2 locations, they were in a very different situation. One of them only had 1 employee working there. So when she had a day off, the salon was closed. There was a lot of things. There was one regional manager kind of stretched very thin between the 2 locations. And there were just a lot of things that needed work, right? Anyone going through, some personal situations, like I understand your business takes, second seat to what's going on in your life. So no judgment whatsoever. But because we had this kind of hands-on experience with a really thriving location, we were able to then say, okay, let's take these systems and structures, let's replicate it at these other 2. Let's really work on staffing. Let's really work on like the physical location. We've put in a new floor. We put in new lighting. We added some stations. We fixed a lot of the cars. We put in brand new TVs, like tons and tons of capital investment. But it was very much worth it. And they have, grown exponentially in the past few years. But I would say the other huge thing I'm grateful for being part of a franchise is so many other owners. And this brand is it's very near and dear to my heart, but it's also, because it's a kid brand, it attracts very similar types of owners, people that want to be involved in the community, people that genuinely care about children and the lives of families, and like, how can we make our community better through this experience of having a great haircut. And because of that, we have our own Facebook group. We have, group texts going. There's an biannual, like every 18 months, there's a conference we attend. And there's just a lot of different things that being part of a network can help you, rather than when you're just out doing it on your own.
Yeah. Well, and the nice part about franchises is the processes and systems have already been built, plus the brand name. So instead of going through what most entrepreneurs do when they first start a business, I call it the suck. A good friend of mine calls it the valley of sorrow. Those first 3 years when you're trying to figure out products, you're trying to figure out pricing, you're trying to figure out where you're at in the world, trying to build your authority, trying to do a whole bunch of things. That part has been done. Now you're walking into a proper business that already has a lot of the stuff that sucks done. And I think it's a beautiful thing for people, especially transitioning like you into, transitioning into something else. It's nice, to have the system. It's really good that you had one location that was working well, so you could then model that as well. So that sounds like an awesome situation.
Yeah, exactly. And like, teachers are used to following a formula, right? Like, there is a structure to how your classroom needs to go. There's a structure to how a lesson needs to go. And, a lot of teachers were great students, not all, but a lot were great students, and therefore great rule followers. So when you have a recipe and you're like, okay, if you do this, you will be successful. I am 100% a rule follower. Not all our entrepreneurs are, but I definitely have found as you work through it, you find, where am I going to push back on the rules and where am I going to follow the rules? And when there's a format in front of you, like, I don't know if I would have been brave or courageous enough to start a business on my own, but because there was this kind of safeguard of like, oh, there's the recipe, there's these things you can follow. Now I'm like, okay, now it's fabulous and wonderful. And I think, maybe a few more years down the road, I will open my own business, because, you build that momentum and that experience.
It's really addictive. Like, in a good way, starting businesses. I've got a good friend of mine who's been doing it for 30 some odd years, built a lot of big businesses, and he's doing it again. He could retire, and he's doing it. He tried retiring for a year, and it wasn't good. He's back on the saddle building another business again, because there's something to that. So
it's very exciting. It's very empowering, and it's very addictive. Like you said, like, you start to figure out like, oh, I could do this, and then I could do this, and then I could do this. And then it's like, okay, yeah, like, this is exciting. I want to do more of this.
and we're passionate about what we do. Like there's specific things that we want to be able to put out into the world and change the world for the better. And being in business is the number one way to do it. I think it's a really sacred calling for entrepreneurs that we're the ones that go out and say, I reject your reality. I substitute my own. Let's go do this way. Let's go try this thing. Let's go make this better. And so I think there's something really wonderful about that.
Absolutely. Yeah. I call it I can do it syndrome.
Yep.
I joke all the time that I am blessed and cursed with I can do it syndrome. It's like, oh yeah, I can do that. Oh yeah, I can do that. Yeah, like let's do this. Like let's see what happens. So
yeah. I don't know. I was that kid that pushed a button to see what happened. If it was a big red button with "Don't push it," I was going to push it. My thing.
Yeah. Yep.
So, Deean, thank you so much for being on the show today. There's going to be a link to Pigtails and Crew Cuts in the description so you can take a look at a little bit more about what the franchise looks like. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom today. I really appreciate it.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for tuning into the Hustle and Grind podcast, where we unpack what it really takes to build something that matters. If today's conversation hit home, do me a favor. Share it with someone who's in the trenches too. And if you're building your own brand, platform, or message and want help turning that story into serious authority, head over to theauthorityforge.com to see how we can help. Until next time, keep showing up, keep shipping, and keep chasing the work that sets you on fire. I'm Andrew, and this was the Hustle and Grind podcast.